Hello, this is Jeremy Palutro, and what we like to do today is a tier list ranking of the retired numbers of the New York Yankees. As we know, the New York Yankees have retired more numbers than any team in the history of baseball, 23 retired numbers. And it's kind of a fun topic, and they've had more great players than any other team in baseball, probably. And I think it might be kind of an interesting or fun way to look at this topic and rank them in this fashion in the tier list style of ranking here. And in case you're wondering who I am, you probably never heard of me, but one thing I have done is I have published a couple of books related to baseball. The first one was a word search book called Championship Teams of Baseball Word Search Book, and had a word search puzzle for every team that's ever won the World Series. And I selected 10 players from that team and to make up the word bank for that puzzle. And then the second book I did a couple years later was Who's Who in New York Baseball, the all-time greatest players. And that had over 100 players from the history of baseball in New York, whether it's the Yankees, the Mets, the Brooklyn Dodgers, New York Giants, and some others. Little mini biographies with some statistics, and I selected over 100 of them to be included in there. So it's a good little book if you're a youth or really at any age would like that book. They're both available on Amazon.com. But so it shows that I, excuse me, have some background on this. I'm not an actual historian, but maybe a semi-historian on the topic. Maybe I have some knowledge of it, pretty good idea of an opinion on the topic. But maybe doing this tier list, if any experts are watching after I'm through with it, they might agree with most of what I did. They might say he does know what he's talking about to a pretty high degree. So maybe this will be an interesting video for someone who's interested in this topic. And I'll just say a few things about each one of them and then put them in whatever tier I want to put them in. And again, I'm just going to explain this. As you can see in front of you, the boxes with the different colors. S would be considered superior, and then followed by almost like a letter grade in school. You get an A or a B or a C, a D or an F. S, in my mind, stands for superior. It would be like the type of ones that I'm going to put in the S tier would be the type of individuals who, even if you were someone who couldn't care less about baseball all your life, and you would still have heard of these ones. Whether you want to or not, you know who they are. You've heard of them. Unless you've been living on another planet or under a rock or something, you've heard of them. And then from there, we work our way down. And so S will be those type of individuals, and everybody else will follow suit. So I could get started here. And I'll bring an image large on the screen, and then it'll be reduced and put down in the tier that it's going to be in. So obviously my number one person on this list, I would say, would have to be Babe Ruth. He's probably the most significant person in the history of baseball. They say he pretty much made baseball. If they're going to retire one number and only one number, it would probably be Babe Ruth's number 3, right? So and again, he started out as a pitcher with the Red Sox, but then they traded him to the Yankees in 1920. And again, the old home run king was Roger Connor of the New York Giants back in the 1880s and 1890s. And he was actually from Waterbury, Connecticut, but he was the all-time home run king of baseball history until Babe Ruth came along. And in the 1920s, he kept setting new standards for home runs and culminating with the 60 home runs in 1927. And then, of course, he played in all the Yankees' first World Series and set the original World Series home run record with 15 home runs, and his 59 home runs as a Yankee and his lifetime batting average are both the Yankee franchise records still. So Babe Ruth is my number one person in here, and he'll go in the S tier for sure. I don't think there's anybody who's never heard of Babe Ruth. So I'll move him up to right up here to the S tier. Okay, so Babe Ruth, we have him in there. Now, the second highest ranking individual in the history of the Yankees, it was kind of a tough decision, but they're all going to be a couple of them up there, I believe. The next most well-known and greatest career of anybody in the history of the Yankees would probably go to Mickey Mantle. They say the greatest switch hitter of all time, 536 home runs. His statistics are just, he had the Triple Crown season in 1956. They say he could have been possibly the best baseball player ever if he had had good legs, didn't injure his knee. And he, again, the 536 home runs. He almost hit 300 lifetime. Yeah, in 1956, he had 52 home runs, 130 runs batted in, 353 average, and won 3 MVP awards. And could still steal some bases, even with the bad legs. And he had his 18 home runs in World Series plays, the all-time record. So, again, he was one of the faces of baseball throughout his career, the biggest player in baseball. So, I mean, there's nobody who doesn't know who Mickey Mantle is. And so he'll go up in the S tier. And there we have Mickey Mantle. And now next on the list would be, and Mantle's number was 7. They retired number 7. So Babe Ruth's number 3 and Mantle's number 7. The next up would be number 5 for Joe DiMaggio. They called him the Yankee Clipper. Came up, and he lost 3 years to. His career is a little shorter than some of them. He lost 3 years to World War II in the service years there, and was once considered baseball's greatest living player. He was voted that during baseball's centennial season when they had the votings in 1969 of all of baseball history. I think Casey Stengel once said Joe he never made a mistake. He was just like a perfect player. He could hit, he could run, he could field. He was one of the best defensive center fielders, and 3 MVP awards. He had the 56-game hitting streak, which is a record that most people think will never be broken. And then he had a long hitting streak right after that. I think he only missed like 1 game. Then he had another 20-game. He almost could have had a 75-game hitting streak or something like that year if he didn't miss 1 game or something like that. And played in 10 World Series. He collected 54 hits in World Series. He just a clutch player and really a perfect player. They say Joe DiMaggio. He did everything right. So he and again he's one of the top. He was one of the number 1 players in baseball throughout his whole career, and he everybody knows who Joe DiMaggio is. So he's a easy S tier ranking. So we'll put him right in there. Okay, then next would be Lou Gehrig. Everybody knows Lou Gehrig. Of course, he's known for his disease that he unfortunately died from at a young age and ended his career. And he had the famous speech on July 4th, the I'm the luckiest man in the face of the earth speech. But again, an unbelievable offensive first baseman. He played for the Yankees in the 20s and 30s and twice won an MVP award, won a Triple Crown. I think he drove in well over 100 runs every single year of his career, and almost 500 home runs in his career. And the captain of the Yankees, they said back then. So everybody, Lou Gehrig's one of the top names in the history of baseball. So number 4 certainly should be retired for Lou Gehrig without any hesitation. So he goes right up there in the S tier as well. Everybody's heard of him. So he'll go right up there with all of them. And that brings us to our next one. And now we're going to a much more recent time. Derek Jeter. He was a captain of the Yankees as well during his time, maybe well into his career. They gave him the captain title. He was a shortstop for the Yankees, number 2. Uniform number was retired. Again, he was part of a Yankee dynasty. He had those back-to-back championship seasons, and he too was one of the biggest stars of baseball. He was on magazine covers and commercials and everything. He was one of the top athletes in all the sports. I think it might have been him and Tom Brady and Roger Federer. I mean, you'd see them on everything from the sports world. And from baseball, it was always Derek Jeter. He was the top Yankee star of all those years, and a clutch player, exceptional postseason performer. I think he had a high batting average in just about every single postseason that he played in. And let's see what I have here. I got to see. I know he had 200 hits in a season 8 times. That's one impressive statistic that I saw about him. And in his career, let me see here. Yeah, he had 3,465 hits. So he's in the 3,000 hit club. He was MVP of the 2000 World Series. Yeah, he hit 400 or better 10 times during the postseason. Of course, that includes all the postseason series, whether it's division series, championship series, or World Series. But he was just over and over again a player that did a lot, just about more than anybody else to help the team win. So he can maintain a S status. I think everybody would know who Derek Jeter is if you even if you couldn't care less about baseball, you'd know who he is. So he would be up there with them. He's just one of those top names in the history of the Yankees and the history of baseball as well. So number 2 is his uniform number. So number 3, number 7, number 5, number 4, and number 2 go up in the S tier, I believe. So that's where I would put them. And okay, so moving on. Next, I would have Yogi Berra. He's considered by many to be the Yankees' all-time catcher. He played for the Yankees. Number 8 was his uniform number. He played from the late 1940s to the early 1960s. He was on many championship teams and was one of the top catchers in baseball. Could hit any pitch, they say, and he could hit a pitch over his head and hit a home run off of it. A good handler of pitchers and a 3-time MVP. He won 3 MVP awards. He hit over 300 a few times, and just a great hitter in the World Series and all those World Series. You hear a lot about how Mickey Mantle had 18 home runs in World Series play for the all-time record. Berra actually had 12. So he is right up there. They consider him one of the best, definitely in the top 5, maybe the top 3 catchers in all of baseball is Yogi Berra. So he is definitely a solid, of course, he's one of those characters in baseball. So I'll definitely give him an A as his selection as a Yankee retired number. So he's a number 1 of the rest of the A categories. Here he definitely gets an A grade for his number being retired. No reason for it not to be. And let's see, next we'll go to our first pitcher in the group, Whitey Ford. They call him the chairman of the board. He pitched for the Yankees in the 50s and 60s. In that dynasty era, he considered the winningest pitcher in Yankee history. He has the highest winning percentage and has the most wins of any pitcher in Yankee history. Played on all those many World Series teams. He's had a clever pitcher. He once broke a record for scoreless innings in World Series play. It was actually Babe Ruth's old record, and he one of the greatest pitchers in the history of baseball. He ranks very high up there, so he's certainly one of the greatest Yankees ever. So he won a Cy Young Award. So we'll put him give him an A right alongside Berra. And let's see. So Whitey Ford. Next we have a pitcher who's considered, this is a little bit different status, a little bit different category, but he's considered the all-time greatest relief pitcher in baseball history, and certainly in Yankee history. So Mariano Rivera. He is the all-time franchise leader in saves for sure, and had a tremendous long, exceptional postseason record, I believe. And postseason play, he had a 0.70 earned run average during postseason play, less than 1. And he played in a lot of postseason series. He was an MVP twice was postseason MVP, 1999 World Series and 2003 ALCS. So he broke Dave Righetti's old Yankee record for saves in a single season, and not just franchise record, but major league record. And then I think best of that total one other time broke his own record, I think. And so just as a relief pitcher, he's one of the highest ranked. Was elected to the Hall of Fame unanimously, and so he is certainly an A recipient of the retired number. So we'll slide him right in there in the A tier. Let's see. Next, we have. Okay, now this is a player who's a little less known to fans today for sure, but it's the other number 8, Bill Dickey. He was a catcher. He was the Yankee catcher before Yogi Berra. Dickey was mostly a star of the 1930s, maybe into the early 1940s. They retired the 2 number 8s on the same day one time, and because Berra wore the number after Dickey. So Dickey's the other number 8. Fans don't know him very well. He's an older player, but one interesting fact about Bill Dickey was that when baseball celebrated its centennial season back in 1969, they had a voting. That's when they voted on who the greatest player of all time is, who the greatest living player is. And each team selected, the fans voted on who the greatest player was at each position and formed an all-time team. And it's an interesting fact that Bill Dickey was actually named the all-time Yankee catcher, which is really hard to believe. It had to have been a close voting because most people, and I think I feel like it should be Yogi Berra, but maybe not by as much because you don't know Dickey as well. But it must have been a close voting, but it was Bill Dickey was the all-time catcher. And, I even remember getting a baseball card set. I think it was maybe a Christmas gift back when I was 11 years old. It was the Yankees all-time team. And I remember the catcher in that card set was Bill Dickey. There was not a Yogi Berra card. It was Bill Dickey. And but again, that even the players included in that, it stems from that voting back then of who the all-time Yankee team was, who was included in that card set. But Bill Dickey, again, a great career. Batted over 300 on a regular basis, part of, more than usual championship teams, played in a few World Series. And he was just one of the best catchers in the history of baseball. I think he was considered a very great defensive catcher. So he's known for that. So he's really, even though he's lesser known, does belong in the A tier. Because he really is right up there with Yogi Berra in the history of catchers. And again, interesting fact about how that voting went back at that time. But again, Dickey, not very popular, well-known former player in the retired numbers to fans today, I'm sure. You don't hear as much about him, as would be the case with Philrosuto. People know Philrosuto because he is a well-known figure, but known a lot for, when people remember Philrosuto, multiple things come to mind, but a lot of it has to do with him being a broadcaster for the Yankees for so many years after his playing career, that if you take away his broadcasting career, he wouldn't have been the popular figure that he was long after his playing career. He's more of a Joe Gordon than a Joe DiMaggio. But that's not too bad either. Nobody knows who Joe Gordon is. And Joe Gordon's one of the best second basemen ever, just like Bill Dickey's one of the best catchers ever. And that's how Rizzuto is as a shortstop. But you wouldn't know him if he didn't have his broadcasting career. He'd be kind of like that. So what we do have with Philrosuto as a player, and again, the retired number is only for his playing career, not for his broadcasting career. So he is one of the best defensive shortstops in the history of baseball, one of the best bunters in baseball history. Actually, he and Jackie Robinson were considered two of the best bunters and base runners in baseball during that era. And as oddly as it sounds, the Yankees once clinched the pennant on a bunt by Rizzuto. They had DiMaggio on third base, and the game was tied against the Cleveland Indians, and Rizzuto dropped the bunt down and pushed DiMaggio across the plate, and the Yankees won the game and clinched the pennant. And so he was played in many World Series. He's one of the Yankee players who ranks high in the World Series all-time lists. He was the American League Most Valuable Player in 1950. And was MVP of a World Series, and was eventually elected to the Hall of Fame after a long wait. So he can certainly have his number retired by his team, spent his whole career with the Yankees, so we'll put him in the A tier. With them as well. Just one of the best shortstops. And so moving on, we have... we're going to move on to a different selection here. We have our first manager who's in the Hall of Fame, Casey Stengel. They retired number 37. Well, Rizzuto's number was 10, and Bill Dickey was 8. So we have number 37 now for Casey Stengel, who was a manager of the Yankees in the 1950s from 1949 to 1960. And he won 10 pennants in 12 years. He was a very different character. He had a platoon system where he shifted players and put people out, move people in, move people around, did all these different things, a lot of different strategies that were innovative. And so he was he's considered one of the best baseball minds in the history of baseball. He's just considered a great Hall of Fame, a great man, one of the greatest managers ever. So Casey Stengel did have his number retired by the Yankees for his time. He also included 5 consecutive World Series from 49 to 53 when he was managing. So Casey Stengel's an A as manager. It's a little different to compare managers and players, but for an honor. But Casey Stengel's a manager for the Yankees who had his number retired. And that brings us to the other manager who's had his number retired in a more recent era, Joe Torre. Had a phenomenal run as a Yankee manager. He came in 1996, and the Yankees started winning championships. They had a formidable group of players. They started to have actually 3 in a row right after that, and then had a string of postseason appearances, at least in the years that followed, that They may have gotten eliminated, but they made it to the postseason. They always had great players. Again, Torre was a manager who I don't think any players had an issue with. I think he was very good with all of his players. And even if the team wasn't doing as well, maybe in some of his later years, he still handled everything very well, had all the right answers for the press, and he didn't do very much wrong as a manager, and was just a good individual to have with the Yankees during that time that he was there. And they won four, I believe it was four championships and maybe six pennants during the time that Torre was the manager, and ranks high on the Yankees' all-time list of wins by a manager. So we put him on as an A and put him in the 8th tier as a retired number for as a manager. And so that brings us to our other retired numbers of the Yankees. How about this? Thurman Munson, one of the best catchers in baseball during his era. His career was cut a little bit short because of his plane crash, and he died at a young age, unfortunately. But he was in the 1970s, he was the Yankee catcher, and he was a captain of the Yankees, and helped lead them to 3 pennants and 2 championships. And was MVP in 1976 after being Rookie of the Year earlier in his career. And let's see, in those a 292 lifetime hitter. He again, 1,558 hits doesn't sound like much, but in just 10 seasons, that's a lot of hits in 10 seasons. And of course, he was a phenomenal postseason player, and his lifetime postseason batting average was 357. So that's the 3 championship series and 3 World Series that he played in. So in 6 postseason series, he has a 357 lifetime average. So just a great player all around, and one of the leader of the Yankees, and during his time there. So I'll put him in the A tier as well. Certainly deserving of it. Number 15 was his. Torre was number 6. Number 15 is Thurman Munson. So he is there. And next would be one of the best pitchers you could ever have, Ron Guidry. He pitched for the Yankees in the later 70s and the 1980s. One of the best pitchers ever. He won the Cy Young Award in 1978. He had one of the best seasons you could possibly have by a pitcher in 1978. Let's see what we have here. He struck out like 250 batters. He had 248 strikeouts, 25 wins, 3 losses, 9 shutouts, 1.74 earned run average. That was in 1978. So he helped into 2 pennants in 77 and 78, and championships both years, and another pennant in 81. He had 2 other 20-win seasons in his career outside of 1978. Won the Cy Young Award, led the league in earned run average a couple times, and shutouts and complete games. He just one of the best pitchers you could have pitching a game. I always feel like when I watch a rerun of a telecast of Guidry watching a game, then you watch some other game in current baseball, you feel like the pitcher makes the other pitchers look like they're lost compared to Ron Guidry pitching a game. And he was one of the best defensive pitchers ever. He could jump off the mound and grab hard-hit balls back to the infield and throw them out, and was later named a co-captain of the Yankees as well. So he was really just one of the greatest pitchers in the history of the Yankees. So I'll put him in the A tier as well. He can go right up there. So that's good. We'll put him right there. So next we have Don Mattingly. Now, Don Mattingly is a little bit different character in the history of the Yankees. One component that's missing he was a first baseman, number 23. His number was retired. He, for a time, it might be a bit of an exaggeration, but there was a 5-year period where him as an offensive player was almost like Sandy Koufax as a pitcher, I would say. I mean, Koufax didn't have the longest career. His career totals don't rank as high. But what he was as a pitcher for a certain time period was like the best you could possibly have. And Mattingly might almost be like that offensively for a certain time period during his career. His 238 hits in 1986 are still the Yankee single-season record. And he had, I believe his 53 doubles is still a Yankee record as well in a single season. He was MVP in 1985. He won the batting championship and just multiple seasons of and a great defensive first baseman, one of the best defensive first basemen you could possibly have. The only missing component from Mattingly is very little postseason, no championship, no pennant, through no fault of his own. But that's one thing that just didn't happen during his playing career with the Yankees. But still, one of the best ever that the Yankees ever had. Extremely highly regarded for his focus and his preparation for games, and just one of the best players you could have, and just a perfect model of a player for players to be like who want to be players. So he's definitely maintains the A status. He belongs in the A tier. So I'll put Mattingly up there. And so next we have a member of what they called the core four of the more recent Yankee winning era in the Torre era, and when he was managing his pitcher, another Yankee pitcher, Andy Pettitte. And Pettitte pitched, from the late 90s to the early 2010s. And again, multiple championship teams, one of the best pitchers in baseball during his playing career. He had a tremendous postseason record. He played in many postseason series. And 52 strikeouts in 7 World Series. He was MVP of the 2001 ALCS. But here's 7 pennants and 5 championships. He's the Yankees' all-time franchise leader in strikeouts, 2,020 strikeouts. I mean, imagine saying that you pitched for the Yankees and struck out more batters than any pitcher in the history of the Yankees. Well, Andy Pettitte did pass Whitey Ford on that list, and he just ranks high in all the Yankee categories, and just one of the best pitchers the Yankees had. So he can certainly go in the A tier as well. Give him an A grade as a retired number. He's number 46, by the way. I probably should mention all their numbers. The number that they had, he was number 46. Mattingly was 23. Guidry was 49. So Andy Pettitte. And that next brings us to Bernie Williams. He was a center fielder for the Yankees. He was a batting champion once of basically the same era as Pettitte. And center fielder, he was a batting champion once. One of the top hitters in baseball. He, let me see here. Yep, 6 pennants and 4 championships. Yeah, batting champion in 1998, and 8 seasons above the 300 mark during his career. And one key thing about Bernie Williams, he was in postseason play. He's the all-time leader in postseason with 22 home runs. And that includes all the World Series, Championship Series, and Division Series. So he's had quite a run with the Yankees. So his number 51 can certainly go in the A tier. So next, that brings us to another member of the core four from that era, Jorge Posada. Posada, again, had quite a career with the Yankees, one of the best catchers in baseball during his time. Played on all those postseason series for the Yankees. Was always a clutch postseason performer. He had a few clutch moments himself in the postseason, some big hits. Let's see, 275 home runs in his career, 379 doubles. A few times placed fairly high in the MVP voting. And again, a major figure in that run of success that the Yankees had. And played his whole career with the Yankees. So no real reason for him not to have his number retired by the Yankees as well. So number 20 for Jorge Posada. We'll put him in the A tier as well. All right, so let's see. Who else do we have here? All right, next is Roger Maris. Going back to another different era. Again, you want to give him an A, but I'm not quite sure. His career with the Yankees was less than 10 seasons. That's the only thing. He was injured later in his career and didn't leave on the best terms. But Number 9 for Roger Maris. The key thing that you know about Roger Maris is that he broke Babe Ruth's home run record when he hit 61 home runs in 1961. He was a 2-time MVP in 60 and 61, back-to-back years, and was part of those pennant winners and championship seasons for the Yankees in the early 60s there. And him and Mickey Mantle went after the home run record in 61 there before Mantle went down. And Roger Maris, I say, was one of the best all-around players. It wasn't just home runs. He was a great defensive right fielder. He could run the base paths well, kind of like Joe DiMaggio there. They didn't actually steal a lot of bases, but was a good base runner and knew how to run the bases and had a great throwing arm in right field. And even looking at defensive WAR, one of those advanced matrix, when I was looking at Roger Maris ones, you would think it'd be the 1961 season, which certainly did rank high, but his highest WAR score actually came in the 1960 season, his first of the 2 MVP years. And so the home runs obviously aren't everything, but he was a most valuable player than he ever was before, was really in that 1960 season. But that's an example of how he wasn't all home runs. And again, one of the top Yankees. He had over 200 home runs with the Yankees in less than 10 seasons. He had over 200 home runs. So a great run for Roger Maris. So I'll put number 9. I'll have to give him he's kind of a B+, because of just being a little bit of a shorter time with the Yankees, but he obviously did some significant things, was a great player. But I'll give him a solid B, though. It's not a bad grade, but he's right up there. So Roger Maris, and let's see, who else should I think of next? How about another player from the more recent time? The last retired, let's see, they have, and Roger Maris was number 9. So let's look at number 21, Paul O'Neill. Kind of a middle-of-the-road guy for the retired number honor. He was a veteran player for the Yankees during that Jeter, Torre, Pettitte, and Williams era there, and he was a right fielder. He was a tremendous hitter. A batting champion in 1994. When he originally came to the Yankees, they were still rebuilding a little bit, and he made the transition from that to all the winning years and those championship seasons and postseason series, and he was a batting champion and a tremendous, he was a clutch player for the Yankees and a sort of a veteran leader and competitor for the Yankees, and had a lot of great postseason series and almost 200 home runs as a Yankee in a fairly short career. So Paul O'Neill, number 21, is, I'd give him a B. I'd put him in the B tier for the retired number honor. He could probably be right there. So there's number 21. And next I would look at is Elston Howard. Elston Howard was a catcher. Earlier in his career, he played in the outfield when Yogi Berra was still the catcher, but he succeeded Yogi Berra as the Yankee catcher by the end of the 1950s, and was the American League's most valuable player in 1963. I think he batted almost 350 during the 1961 season, the same one of the greatest Yankee teams ever, when Maris and Mantle had the home run chase, and Elston Howard was one of the leaders of the Yankees, a great defensive catcher, they say. And the only thing I could say, the only negative thought I have about Elston Howard is how his career is, very similar to numerous other Yankees who don't have their numbers retired and aren't in Monument Park, who were significant on all those championship teams like Tommy Henrik and Charlie Keller and Allie Reynolds and Gil McDougall, Bobby Richardson. I mean, sometimes I wonder, did he really do that much more than them? And they're not out there. But then Elston Howard was a coach for the Yankees after his playing career. And also the other notable thing about Elston Howard, when he came up to the Yankees in 1955, he was the first African-American to ever play for the Yankees. So that's a significant factor that he has too. I mean, I guess if you're going to select one of those bunch of players that I named off, Elston Howard would be the choice. I mean, they picked the right guy, but you just don't know if he distanced them that much. But he was also later a coach. But either way, at the end of his time with the Yankees, before he died young of a heart condition, unfortunately, he was thought of as somebody who should possibly manage the Yankees. So between his coaching career that he had up to that time and his time as a career, Elston Howard was certainly a highly regarded individual in the Yankee organization. So, and his uniform number was 32, by the way. So he, could have his number retired by the Yankees. It's not. So I'll give him a B. He can go in the B tier. So we have Elston Howard, number 32. So that brings us to a very different selection. Billy Martin. Billy Martin, he wore uniform number 1, was retired by the Yankees. He was first wore the uniform number 1 in the 1950s, early to mid 1950s as a Yankee player. He was predominantly a second baseman, considered a spark plug type of player for that team. He had some tremendous and record-setting World Series performances during his playing career. Let's see, Billy Martin. Yeah, he had 12 hits in the 6-game record, 12 hits for a 6-game series in 1953. 10 extra base hits in his 4 World Series that he played in. So he knew when to rise to the challenge. He was a spark plug player. And then, but his career with the Yankees as a player wasn't very long. But then years later, he came back as a manager in 1975 and throughout the rest of the 70s and throughout the 1980s. He was off and on as a manager, but he was hired and fired. He was hired and then fired 5 times and hired back again. But he was a very different manager, a lot of different tactics, a lot of different ideas. He was a very great baseball managing mind, they say. And of course, the retired number of the Yankees only looks at his time with the Yankees. So all the stuff he did as a manager with other teams does not count toward his candidacy for a retired number. But he's even better as a manager, and you consider all of everywhere he went, he had a winner. They say first he went to Minnesota, then he went to Detroit, then he went to Texas, then left the Yankees and went to Oakland and went back to the Yankees again. Everywhere he went, he turned the team around. But Billy Martin had a lot of issues. I think they really do consider him to be an alcoholic, and he was combative and went after umpires and players and fought with players, and a lot of turmoil and a lot of issues with Billy Martin, kind of a different character. But again, his retired number came as a cumulative thing for his playing career and managing career combined with the Yankees. And but Billy Martin, of course, he did have a nice side. He always wanted to be good to the fans. I remember once there was a quote by Billy Martin saying, "You got to be good to the fans because in the end they're all you got." And he didn't like players who didn't want to sign autographs and things like that. So, but a lot of players, of all the problems you hear with Billy Martin, you'd be surprised at how many other players he had. Not all of them had issues with Billy Martin. Actually, one lesser known middle infielder for the Yankees was Bobby Meacham, and he played for Billy Martin. And he, when he was hired to manage a minor league team, the Hartford Yard Goats, was interviewed and quoted as saying that, he loved playing for Billy Martin, had no issue with him at all. So I mean, Meacham was one of those easygoing guys, and even if he was easygoing, you would think that maybe he couldn't take playing for Billy Martin, and it was too much for him to take or whatever. But no, he had no issue with Billy Martin at all. He was one of those other players who played with him. So. But again, Billy Martin ranks high. He won a championship with the Yankees, and they would want, even though they would get rid of him, they would want to bring him back. And again, he did well with those other teams. You could see how he can turn teams around. So, but again, a lot of issues with Billy Martin. So I'll give him a C. He did well with the Yankees, but was, both as a manager and a player, not there too long because he kept being in and out of his managing career, and they traded him away as a player because of some of the trouble he was in, but also did a great job and was a highly regarded person with the Yankees who had some significance. And okay, so that leads us to our final one. Really one of the biggest names in the history of baseball, but Reggie Jackson, known as Mr. October. Obviously, if Reggie Jackson had played his whole career with the Yankees, he would rank at the lowest in the A tier. Maybe even S, but a few issues with Reggie Jackson being a retired number of the Yankees, number 44. Only 5 seasons with the Yankees, caused quite a bit of trouble. He wrote the article, he disrespected Munson and Martin and all kinds of issues, and there's a lot of problems. And but what he did do, they called him Mr. October for a reason. He hit the 3 home runs in the World Series game and was MVP of the World Series, and really was a clutch, great player for the Yankees, but again, only 5 seasons and some issues there, and so Martin or Jackson, excuse me. I'll put him in I'll put him in the D tier as a retired number for the Yankees. But again, he's not as bad as he looks. it's the number one thing is only 5 seasons with the Yankees. I think he played in less than 500 games as a Yankee. And again, some of the stuff that he's remembered for and what went on when he was there. It's not the best guy on the team in some ways, but he was a clutch player. But not a perfect selection for the retired number. And so there you have it, the 23 retired numbers of the Yankees. And hopefully, I didn't want to talk too long about everybody. I mean, there's more you could say about everybody here, but I tried to give some reasons of what my thought processes are about them and why I would regard them the way I do in terms of them receiving the Yankees, having their number retired by the Yankees, and their time with the Yankees is all that's taken into account when they have their numbers retired. And so hopefully everybody enjoyed this tier list ranking of the retired numbers of the New York Yankees. And again, post comments with your thoughts. And thanks for watching.